In the summer of 1991, when girls not far from my suburban Maryland home were talking revolution, I was 14 and going to theater camp. In our production of The Wiz, I played the good witch who comes in near the end and teaches Dorothy that she can find her way home if she just believes in herself. I wore a pink satin prom dress, and I rode onto the stage enclosed in an 8-foot lotus made of plywood painted pinkish lavender. The stagehands, all 16 years old and crass, dubbed my floral conveyance the vast violet vulva. Moments before my entrance every night, they shut me up inside the vulva, and I stood there awaiting my cue, encased in shadows, tinted the same pink you see when your eyes are closed, but there's a brightness just beyond your eyelids, waiting for you to open up and see. That summer, a few weeks after the end of The Wiz, I went to a clothing store, a Ross Dress for Less. While my parents were out browsing the racks, I tried on shirts alone in the fitting room, and the attendant, a young man probably in his late teens, struck up a conversation. We chatted through my fitting room's curtain, and I answered his questions nonchalantly, tossing aside a t-shirt, considering a plaid button-down, not this one. And then he said something clearly indicating, whether explicitly or implicitly, I'm not sure, but his meaning was evident, that he would like to fuck me. I froze in the tiny cubicle, a rejected shirt encircling my forearms, my hands disappearing in the collar. I was certain that I would vomit, right there on the pin-strewn gray carpet. "Your parents are gone," he said. "They can't hear us." Or was it, "They can't hear you"? The threat I heard in his voice may have been real. It may also have been a shadow cast by the threat I'd been taught that all girls, particularly from age 13 onward, faced from nearly any man at nearly any moment. Having ingested endless lessons of peril and caution, I was now living a worst-case scenario, trapped, topless, near a man who wanted to violate me with only a canvas curtain separating me from the would-be attacker. Perhaps I could vomit on him. I had heard that sometimes worked. "Sarah, did you find anything?" My mother. Gratefully, I went out to meet her by the three-way mirror, hugging the shirts and their hangers to my body like clumsy armor. I told you I never read this out loud. I'm like, whoa, what's that sentence? I never came any closer to genuine sexual danger, but for years I braced myself for it, while marinating in shame over having somehow led the fitting room attendant on him, and also Peter, the tall drummer in marching band, who shoved me against a locker in an empty hallway one morning and held me there for a horrifying minute, as if trying to decide what to do with me, before the footsteps of an approaching teacher set me free. I'd never told anybody about either incident. They both felt like they'd been my fault. I experienced female adolescence as a constant affront, with calamity always loitering nearby, licking its lips, waiting for an opening. I spent the beginning of my teens miserable, alienated, and isolated, and I was sure I was the only one who felt this way. It wasn't an unreasonable thing for me to believe. I had no social group, no pocket of belonging. I'd quit the drama club after its vice president, a short, jolly girl who wore patchouli and crushed velour, told me that our gentle kisses in the front seat of her mom's Chevy Suburban went against God's plan for her. Cut loose from the only tribe I'd known, I drifted, too weird for the smart kids' clique, but too diligent for the purple-haired rebels who smoked cigarettes behind the school gym during lunch. I began escaping to D.C. on weekends, boarding the metro at its last stop in the suburbs, a brief eight-lane highway dead-ended at the Shady Grove Station's treeless parking lot. And when my parents dropped me off, I loved finding the waiting trails, behemoths idling on their lethal voltage rails. Their eventual lurch into motion felt exhilarating, like dropping off a cliff. Back at school, I ate my lunch alone in an empty hallway, then retreated to the school library, where I napped in a corner between the books on feminism and the emergency exit. Just getting through each day was exhausting. I was desperate for something that might save me, or help me save myself. I first learned about Riot Grrrl in autumn 1992. I had just come home from another dispiriting day of 10th grade, and I was standing at the kitchen table, sorting through the mail, when an article in the new issue of Newsweek grabbed both my arms and shook me. The piece, titled "Revolution Girl Style," opened with a scene of a girl standing up to a sexual harasser at school. "Don't touch me or my friends." It went on to describe a nationwide network of teen feminists who came together to support one another, fight back against harassing classmates, and talk about, quote, everything from tuning guitar strings to coming out of the closet. The girls, according to this piece, were sexy, assertive, and loud. Although I wasn't sexy and didn't particularly want to be, I remembered that for a while in elementary school, and intermittently since then, I had been assertive and loud, and I missed being that girl. I know that for those of you who know me, that's very difficult to believe. And I read the whole piece twice, not even bothering to sit down. It said the Riot Grrrls had recently held a convention in Washington, D.C. Could this be true? There were girls in my area who might understand me? When my mother came home and read the article, she remarked that the movement didn't seem like anything I would want to be involved in. I had never wanted anything more in my life. The Riot Grrrls were so near to me that I sometimes imagined I could smell their magenta hair dye. What if one of them went to my school? In the pre-internet age, though, my search turned up only dead ends. Throughout 10th and 11th grade, I scoured the Washington Post style section, studied the meetings classified ads in the city paper, and looked under Riot Grrrl in the DC phone book, and checked the bulletin board of the feminist bookstore downtown, where I had begun to camp out on weekends, reading Alison Bechdel and Luce Irigaray. Of course, it's closed now. I uncovered no leads. Skipping, because in early 93, I finally found an address for the DC chapter of Riot Grrrl. It was printed in Off Our Backs, a long-running feminist journal I had discovered during my weekend sojourns at aforementioned feminist bookstore. One of them had interviewed a few Riot Grrrls and listed the group's post office box. I mailed off an effusive letter. I heard nothing back for months. Eventually, an envelope came back to me with 3 Xerox flyers. One flyer read in part, "Okay, so I propose that those girls who want to change things start writing stuff on their/our hands. Magic marker works good. You can draw hearts or stars or write words on your fingers, whatever. It will just be a way for pro-revolution girls to identify each other." I was a secret agent, receiving intermittent clues and instructions from an unknown headquarters. The communiques were coming more quickly now. I would comply. I drew lopsided stars on the backs of my hands, pushing a marker over spindly ridges of bone. I wrote on the longest joints of my fingers, 1 letter per knuckle, RIOT on the right and GIRL on the left. I rode the county bus, I rode the metro, I went to museums, I went to class, I waited to see another one. I waited to stumble into a whole pack of them. I waited for a gang to stop me and say, "You're coming with us." My piano teacher told me to go wash my hands. I feel like I've been reading